the word sort of spread like folklore throughout the company. And in many respects, I think it added to my humanness as a leader and perhaps added to my approachability as a leader. And that's where you really want to be at the end of the day. It's not about you. It's not about you being the smartest person in the room, but it is about how human you are around other people. And when you are human and when people can connect with you and really believe that they can approach you, that is when you get results.
Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Walt Rakowich is a leadership speaker, author, and former CEO of Prologis, a global real estate company. In addition to speaking to audiences on a range of leadership topics, Walt is also an active member on several corporate and philanthropic boards. Walt, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Sam. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure is mine. Walt, there are 3 questions I ask every guest who comes to the show in 90 seconds or less. Can you tell me, where did you start, where are you now, and how did you get there?
Okay. Well, I would say my background's actually pretty simple. I only worked for 2 real estate companies in my career. After I got out of business school, I spent 9 years with Trammell Crow Company in Los Angeles, developing warehouses in the City of Commerce, South Bay markets. That's really where I cut my teeth in the business. And then after the recession in the early 90s, I went to work for Security Capital Industrial Trust, which changed its name to Prologis, the company that you know today. And so I went with the company right after they went public. I moved to the Midwest and ran the Midwest region, was asked then to come to Denver, become CFO, and then became president, chief operating officer, and ultimately became the CEO of the company. I retired in 2012 and in late 2012, December 31st. And today I sit on 3 REIT boards. I sit on my university board, Penn State University. I'm the chairman of the board of a very large urban youth organization, teaching kids about character. And then I wrote my first book 2 years ago, and I speak and I blog on leadership, which I think is a really important topic. So that's where I was, and that's where I am. Hopefully that's kept your 90 seconds.
I think you did really well. That's that's perfect. Tell me this. So what motivates you today? I know you said that you're on several boards, you're on an urban youth board, you love to talk about leadership, but what drives you right now?
Well, I probably spend a third of my time in what I would call business on the boards that I'm on. I'm on the board of the largest owner of hotels in the world, a company called Host Hotels. I'm on the board of one of the largest senior housing and life sciences company called Ventas out of Chicago. And I'm on the board of Iron Mountain, which is a records management, data backup and recovery and data center company. So I spent probably a third of my time on that. What motivates me is not just that, but I spend probably another 2/3 of my time, I should say, in education. I believe education is the key to unlocking potential in our communities. And I agreed to be on the Penn State board a few years ago, 8 years ago. And but importantly, I chair the board of an organization called Colorado Uplift. And Uplift is, we teach urban youth about what it means to live a life of character. And we do that in the public school system where we believe we can be most impactful. And then the other third of my time I spend in leadership. Ever since I left Prologis, I have invested my time in trying to raise up better leaders in this world and in the business community. And I've spoken to numerous groups. I blog on a weekly basis. I conduct LinkedIn Live shows with other leaders. I've been on podcasts like this one and even wrote a book called Transfluence. And Transfluence stands for transformational influence. Our lives are basically all about making a transformative influence in the lives of those that we are surrounded by, I believe. I don't believe it's about us. I believe it's about them. And I think we should focus more time and attention on them. And by doing so, we will succeed.
I love that. It sounds like you would say that leadership is a skill that can be taught.
Absolutely. There's no question in my mind it can be taught. In fact, I think it's very much learned by the people that are around you. And the more we observe the folks around us that are both good and bad, the more, and frankly, the more we read, I believe the more we can learn about what good leadership looks like.
Where do you start with someone if you said, hey, there's somebody that wants to, and it's something I'm actually, the reason I ask these questions is because it's something I've actually just started compiling a list of leadership books here in the last week going, okay, this is probably a weak spot for me. And it's something I want to, so I'm asking these from a very personal point of view. Where do you start with someone when you say, hey, you know what, you want to up your leadership game? Here's where you start.
Well, I can tell you, I think that's a really great question. I'll tell you a story. It really got me thinking about this. So my background was I left Prologis and in 2008, 10 months later, and I was the number 2 person in the company. 10 months later, our stock had plummeted 95%.
Wow.
I was asked to come back and be the CEO of a turnaround. One of the first calls that I made was to a person called John Mack. And John Mack was the CEO of Morgan Stanley at the time, which, by the way, in 2008, Morgan Stanley was going bankrupt. So was Goldman Sachs. So was a lot of organizations, right? And I said to John, how are you running this company? What are you doing to get your people energized? How are you leading? And he said, Walt, I lead on the basis of the 3 H's. And I said, what the heck is that? And he said, I think the best leaders, Walt, are humble, they're honest, and this day and age, a banker needs to have a sense of humor. We all need to have a sense of humor. And I wrote that down that day, and I really mulled it over. And actually, it's one of the key pieces of the book that I wrote. And I call it the 3H core. And I believe that the best people are humble. Humility is about how you view yourself. I believe that I wouldn't use the word humorous, but I would use the word human, which I think humorous falls underneath of. And humanness is about how you see others. And the third thing is honesty. And honesty is the transaction between you and others that connect the two of you together. It's about building trust. And so I think leadership, the best leaders that are out there are humble. I think they're honest, and I think they're human. And when they are that way, people gravitate to them. And so anyway, that's my answer to your question.
I love it. No, that's absolutely great. Taking the reins back over from a company now that has lost 95% of its stock price. Now you're in a turnaround situation. What were some of the leadership skills that you developed in that time frame, turning Prologis back around?
Well, let me tell you, adversity leads to perseverance, and perseverance builds character. I can't tell you the first day that I walked in to Prologis, I knew how to turn the company around. And very few people have that experience. I never had that experience. And so I tried to be humble. I tried to be human, and I tried to be honest and transparent with my people. But I'll give you another story that I learned a lot from. One of the challenges associated with being human as a leader is that none of us are willing to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is a powerful tool if used right in leadership. And there was one evening where we had a finance meeting, and it was into the evening, like 1 o'clock in the morning, dark outside. And one of my key finance people said to me, Walt, I just got some bad news for you. And I said, what's that? And he said, I think we're going to blow our bond covenants, over $10 billion in bond covenants. And I turned white as a ghost and I said, when? And he said, probably next quarter. We're not going to have the earnings to meet those covenants. Now, I had been with the company for almost 15 years at the time. And I'm telling you, I felt like I was going to faint.
Yeah.
And I walked out of I said, guys, do you mind if I just walk out of the office for a moment? And they said, no, that's fine. And I walked down the hall and I knew I was going to faint. And I saw this chair that was ahead of me. And I beelined to the chair, hoping to get to it to sit down before I fainted. And I didn't get there in time. And my head hit the corner of the desk and I split my head open. And I was laying there for what turned out to be about 10 minutes. And finally, I woke up and honestly, Sam, I didn't know where I was for probably 30 seconds. And then finally, I realized, oh my gosh, all these people are still in this finance meeting waiting for me to come back. So I went to the bathroom. I sutured up my head as best I could. And I had this huge lump. And I walked in and I said, guys, I think what you were telling me is that we're going to have to probably declare bankruptcy. And they said, yeah, that's right. And I said, well, let's talk about it. Let's get it out in the open. And my CFO looked at me and he said, no, Walt, let's talk about that big lump on your head. How did you get that? And it dawned on me, I'm like, I was busted. I looked around. I said, you know what, guys? In a moment of vulnerability, I said, you know what, guys? I was asked to come back and run this company and turn it around. And one thing I realized is that I don't have the answers. Mm. In fact, you guys have the answers. So, I can direct our conversation, but at the end of the day, I need you to come up with the answers to, stave us away from bankruptcy if we can, right? And it was a moment of vulnerability to me, but I'm going to tell you something. It was a powerful moment. And it was a moment that many leaders hope they never have, but in some respects is actually a good thing to have, because the word sort of spread like folklore throughout the company. And in many respects, I think it added to my humanness as a leader and perhaps added to my approachability as a leader. And that's where you really want to be at the end of the day. It's not about you. It's not about you being the smartest person in the room, but it is about how human you are around other people. And when you are human and when people can connect with you and really believe that they can approach you, that is when you get results.
I love that. Yeah, that approachability is huge. And I think, one of the things I hear coming out of you is that there's no room for, I'm probably not going to use the right word here, but is it hubris? Like there's no room for ego.
Right. So pride. So I write about this in my book. I believe that pride and fear are the two greatest challenges that every leader has.
Wow.
One is pride. By the way, I think some pride is actually good. I have pride in my children, their accomplishments. I have pride in my relationship with my wife. And, so I think there is good pride. Where pride gets in the way is when it becomes hubris, when you really believe that you're worth more than you are.
Right.
And people see that, and you will have a difficult time long-term leading with that thought. Fear is probably even a bigger issue that I think most leaders have. And there's many of them, many fears. But I think at the end of the day, that a leader that leads through fear and insecurity also is noticed by those around, he or she, that is. And I think those are things that you have to try to, prevent. And I think things like being humble and recognizing the importance of people through humanity, being willing to be vulnerable, those sorts of things open you up on one hand to people, but on the other hand, they show people that you're willing to sort of sit with them, right? And that's how you get performance out of people. Not that you're trying to do it in a contrived way, but right. Let's face it, people love that, right? They want to connect with you at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I think you said it earlier. It's just being the humanness side of it. It's like I'm just a human, and we're all in this together. Tell me this: when you rewind the last however long your career was, 30 years of your career, and I guess you're 9 years now retired, but were there surprises or pitfalls? I guess obviously 2008 was a surprise and pitfall. Were there surprises or pitfalls along the way that you may have been able to avoid? Was there any way around those or lessons learned out of those?
Well, I can tell you there were plenty of pitfalls. In fact, my first partnership at Trammell Crow Company essentially bankrupted me on paper.
Oh, wow.
I never declared bankruptcy, but I had to explain to my wife, who I just got married to a year before that we had more debts than assets. And she said, "What? Are you kidding me?" That was tough. And of course, it is well documented. In 2008, just so you know, I left Prologis in 2008 before the recession, just before the recession hit. It was January 2008. Our stock price was at roughly $75 a share at the time. But because I had a disagreement with the CEO, and I had a disagreement on mostly how aggressively to manage the company. There were a lot of other things, but we were entering into troubling times, and my boss, the CEO, continued to want to press the pedal to the metal, and I felt that he was wrong. As it turned out, I was right. I didn't realize how right I would be, but when the stock price goes down 95% in 10 months, you're obviously in troubled times. So those were a couple of pitfalls. And yes, looking back on them, I are there lessons learned? I think the biggest lesson in both of those cases was pride. I mean, truly believing that we were something more than we really were, and that we were bigger than the market, or that we had a bigger position, or I in both cases, I wish we would have stepped back before we would have entered into agreements that we entered into, and so. Look, I think at the end of the day, I mentioned to you earlier, I think adversity is good because I do think it builds your character. It did for me. Both of those adverse situations helped me to realize that I was not in control. Quite frankly, both things brought me to my knees in prayer. I became closer to God in both of those, and it made me, I think, a better person. And both eventually did get resolved, but not immediately. And perhaps going through those things were good. Look, one other thing I'd say is no matter how many lessons people try to teach you to avoid this, to avoid that, the truth of the matter is we'll all have adversity in our lives, and we need to embrace it. I know it's hard for people to say this, and really hard while you're going through it, but we need to embrace it. We need to learn from it, and become better. And if we look at it that way, in a positive way, I think at the end of the day, adversity will actually make us better people.
Absolutely. I think it goes back to the idea, there's this notion that someday everybody gets to retire on a beach with a fruity drink and life is grand. But I think everybody, no matter where you are in your business, that the problems don't go away, they just change. I think somebody told me that, and it was like, it kind of relieved that initial stress of making, like you said, make the adversity go away. It's like, you're always going to have adversity. It's just going to be different on the next chapter. So get used to it.
I couldn't agree with you more. Someone once asked me a question, well, how did you succeed? How did you get where you got? And I said, well, through a lot of hard work and resiliency. I mean, one time somebody told me that, your success is basically 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you deal with it. And I really believe that, meaning that we're all going to go through things. The real question is, how do you deal with it? Right. And, do you treat people with dignity and respect? Do you honor other people? And in doing so, they will help you succeed. You just can't isolate yourself out there and be upset about it all, because everybody goes through it.
Absolutely. Question for you on this, and maybe you kind of answered it, but what is one thing you feel like you've done really well in your career or in life that you feel like other people should emulate?
That's a really good question. I never viewed myself as the smartest person in the room. And I think, one of the things that I do well is I prepare. I really try to prepare. And in my career, for example, before I became CEO, I was really fortunate. And some of this is just good luck, but I tried to learn every aspect of the business. From leasing, I leased for 3 years, to development, to acquisitions, to even construction management, sitting down with contractors and asset management. I mean, I had seen all facets of the business by the time I became CEO of Prologis. And so when I sat in front of investors, I could talk the talk. I wasn't just running a company that I didn't really understand the nuts and bolts of. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. And so I really think that my ability to prepare and become knowledgeable of all aspects of the business really helped me over time become successful and run a large company. And at the end of the day, it was not my brilliance, that's for sure. I mean, and I'll tell you, the other thing is, I'm going to get back to something I mentioned. I think it's very important, and you can ask other people who work for me, but it's important to treat people with dignity and respect. And if you do, and I'm not saying I was great at it, but I tried, I worked at it, I was intentional at it. And I do believe that if you do that and put others before yourself as much as you can, they'll help you succeed. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but they will help you succeed. And I think there was a little bit of that as well that happened in my career.
What do you say to somebody? Because, a lot of people probably listening to this show are in the early stages of scaling their business. how do you effectively scale a company and learn everything you need to know about the nuances of each division without getting mired down in the minutia of running each of those divisions in a company?
Okay, so we scaled our business in Europe, where we owned, I don't know, 15, $20 billion in assets. In Asia, we're in China, and we sold a business in China, and then we repurchased the business. I mean, back and forth, we were in South America. So I had the ability to scale a business. And today, I think Prologis is well over $100 billion in assets. Jim Collins one time said, in Good to Great, and I love this quote, "People are not your most important asset. Great people are." And I agree with that. I mean, I used to always walk around saying, "Hey, people are our most important assets. We need to treat them with dignity." I actually think they are, but I think if you don't hire great people, you will never really scale your business. So then Jim Collins went on to say, "Get the right people on the bus."
Right.
When I took over at Prologis, and here we were stock that had gone from $75 to $2 a share. Wall Street Journal front page article, companies going bankrupt. It was bad news. Okay. And I looked around at the 10 people that reported to me, and I ended up having to let go of 4 of the 10.
Wow.
And that was hard, but I didn't think that 4 of the 10, I thought they were great bull market people, but not great bear market people. And we had to be conservative. We had to pay down debt. We had to sell assets, not grow. Use the proceeds to buy back our bonds, renegotiate covenants with our banks. I mean, it was bad. And there are certain people that can do that, and there's certain people that cannot do that. And so you have to look at the people around you and say, what is the task that I'm looking to do? Is it to grow? Well, then I want bull market people, but I want good bull market people, right?
Right.
Or is it to, in essence, save the company, where we needed to have a different breed of people? And so depending on what you're looking for, I think you got to hire great people. And some of that is luck, and some of that is just interviewing very, very well, and get the right people on the bus. And if you do, you'll scale it. You won't have to know everything about the Memphis market and the New York market and the LA market, but your people will tell you enough, and you can trust them, because it's about building trust. And at the end of the day, if you can build trust and have great people, you can scale your business.
I love it. That's an excellent answer. Thank you for that. Walt, we're down to the last 60 seconds here. So last question is this: what kind of impact do you believe you have on other people?
Well, I think you'd probably have to ask other people, but I can tell you that my goal today is to be as positively impactful as I can to future generations. That's why I left Prologis at the ripe old age of 55. I'm now 64. So I work at it. I pray about it every day. I try to be intentional. Like everybody, sometimes I let the cares of the world drag me down. But my hope is through my work on business boards, my work with my university, through education, my work with inner city kids, urban youth, through education, my all the blogging that I do, the speaking that I do, the writing, holding LinkedIn Live events, writing the book Transfluence, perhaps writing other books. I hope all of those things together will enable me to impact other people, because I truly believe that our mission in life is to leave this world better than when we arrived. And the only way we can do that is to put others before ourselves and say, how do we change the lives of other people? How do we take what we knew how to do, and how do we use that in a positive way to change the lives of others? You'll have to ask others, engage as to how well I'm doing, but I'm just being intentional and trying hard at it.
I love it. Walt, thank you for a very inspiring conversation. Appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today. If our listeners want to get in touch, I guess, with you or learn more about you, what is the best way to do that?
A couple things. One, website is waltrakowich.com, WaltRakowich.com. At Twitter, I'm at Walt Rakowich. LinkedIn, Walter Rakowich. And my newsletter, you can just www.waltrakowich.com/newsletter. So lots of different ways of getting a hold of me.
Fantastic. Thank you for coming on the show today. Certainly appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam. Great to be on.